Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So as you can see, I'm in Procreate today and I have a little template of 20 boxes right here, and I'm going to be showing you shortly what I'm going to be doing with this. But because I guess today isn't going to be exactly the last video of 2023, I will have a bonus video going up tomorrow. But for today's video, let's open up the reference tool in Procreate so I can show you guys what I'm going to be referring to. I have downloaded this Genki expression meme by Ryul, and I'll leave the template in the description where I found it. But we are going to be doing all my OCs basically randomized via this wheel, and I'm going to draw whatever the wheel tells me to draw as the different expressions that is on this list. So we're going to start with Akemi first for number, I guess, 1A, and we'll kind of go down the rows and kind of fill out the rest of these boxes. But for every character, I am just going to be drawing whoever the wheel tells me to, just because I don't want to be too biased in terms of picking particular OCs to cater towards certain expressions, because I know there are certain expressions that I'm used to drawing for particular OCs. So just to kind of make sure I vary it up, I will be relying on the wheel to tell me who to draw for each particular expression. And for the most part, I'm going to do them kind of just one by one. So I don't really have too much foresight into remembering which other expressions are on this kind of little meme template. So I zoomed in very closely onto each of the expressions, and it'll be kind of a surprise to see what kind of expression is up next, but also what character I'm going to draw for that expression. So that's basically what we are going to be doing. Up next is Maseki for this yawning pose, and we'll kind of just keep going down the line. Now I'm going to already say this, that I have two other OCs in the works right now. I know I wanted to draw Akemi siblings, so I will definitely do that at some point as well, once I can flesh out their, I guess, like their role in the story, plus like just their personalities and probably the family dynamic between Akemi and his siblings. The other two OCs that I have currently planned is, I guess I'll just like roughly say my plan for this OC. I want some kind of companion for Maseki. I don't know if it's going to be in a romantic sense or just like in a friend kind of way. Probably friendship for now, because I don't know what direction to take Maseki in. If I want him to be more like, I don't know what kind of lover I want to give him is basically what I'm saying. But for now, for the companion or like friend that, or like classmate or whatever character I want to have, it's basically fulfilling an aesthetic that I really wanted for a character for like quite a while, which is basically more of a, I guess, like a stern, more quiet type that seems a little bit more cold, I guess, if that makes sense. But I also want like more of a fluffier flowing hair or something of that sort. So once I get that sorted out, I'll definitely introduce that OC to you guys. Also, by coincidence, the wheel chose basically all of my OCs for the first 4, so that's great. We're gonna run into a little bit of a problem a little bit later, even though I did say at the beginning that I will just draw whoever the wheel tells me to. So I'm not gonna like pick and choose and be like, oh, I want to have, you know, more expressions for this particular OC, or I want to have more of a balance. And I'll explain this a little bit later because it'll be more pertinent to a different portion of the video. But back to the other OCs. The other one that I have planned, who kind of shares a similar aesthetic to the current one that I was trying to make, because I wasn't sure if I was going to make them into separate characters, is that my friend made a cute template on Instagram stories, and she asked me if I could join it, and it was basically to make a magical OC. Now, I haven't really dabbled too much into fantasy or anything like that, so I was kind of excited to make an OC. So you probably saw him on my Instagram stories at some point. I've currently named him Selwyn, so it might be a temporary name. I might commit to it, we'll see. And basically he's just a kind of like more carefree, daydreaming type of character, and his magical power would be turning liquids into crystals, and he's more of like a support type, so he'll use the crystals to help boost and buff other characters or other people in his a party, I guess, if they have to be in a fighting situation. But he's also a little bit of a coward, so he would definitely be the first person to flee from a fight if he feels like he is being cornered. So yeah, in the future, I would like to potentially draw them a little bit more, but once I get them a little bit more solidified, I'll definitely kind of introduce them slowly, and then we can do whatever I want to do with those OCs at some point, because as you guys know, I like keeping my OCs very minimal in terms of like the amount of them, just because I notice I'm the type of person who probably gravitates towards one character and babies them, which happens to be Masaki. But it's the same thing for like Genshin characters, ensemble stars, or anything like fandoms and stuff. I do tend to fixate on one character a little bit more, or like a couple, depending on how big the cast of characters is. But I would like to kind of branch into original art just a little bit more to fulfill that need to draw without having to think about like, oh, does this fit so-and-so's character, or like, oh, this is part of this fandom, I want to keep it within like a particular storyline or something like that where it's more canon. So just to have a little bit more creative liberties, I would like to have more OCs in the future, so I'm gonna start building that out probably for next year, and maybe a little bit later in the video, or I'll do it at the beginning of January for Monday's sketchbook video. I would like to talk about like very rough and not very like finite goals, but just things to keep in mind for 2024 for myself, because one is store update, 2 is probably a little bit more like original art, if anything, just because I would like to eventually expand Masaki's story. And I don't know, it's a bit hard because Masaki's direction as a character, I haven't developed enough to figure out where I can place him in a story. I feel like he would suit slice of life, if anything, but the fact that like I feel very apprehensive in giving him any kind of romantic partner for now, so maybe he's not into anybody, so we'll just leave it at that for now. So back to the drawing really quickly. I am only going to be doing the sketch in Procreate. I am not going to be doing coloring and line art in Procreate, just because I do find myself immensely slow on Procreate whenever it comes to doing cell shading plus line work. So I will be switching over to my drawing tablet or my display tablet, and I will be working in Clip Studio Paint instead of Procreate or Paint Tool SI. So yeah, if you guys have noticed, the wheel has been very generous in terms of like how it's selecting its characters, I guess, or like at least the distribution seems to be quite even at this point. So right now we have Sato, and then I have 3 boxes left. Every time there's like a brief pause or you see my like a shadow in the upper left hand corner, it's because I'm reaching to my phone to click the little spinning wheel thing between each of the chibis. So the next one I'm drawing right now is going to be Masaki, and once we get to the end, you'll see the problem that I run into, because I become very stupid and a little bit blindsided towards something. So now we're working on the second last one, which happens to be Koji. So the fun thing about doing this little expression meme is the fact that I get to draw a lot of my OCs in expressions that I haven't drawn them in. So I feel like Koji probably got the most unfortunate ones in terms of, I feel like, yeah, a little bit. And then for Akemi, I feel like his were a little bit more out of character, if anything. Okay, so this is where you're gonna see that maybe something's off. I think because it went by so quickly, I don't think anyone's gonna be able to keep track of who I've already drawn compared to like another OC, whether or not it's going to be even. And I said earlier that the wheel did a pretty good job at keeping the OCs for the most part quite even. So oftentimes if it was like 2 Akemis in a row, usually Akemi won't appear in the next row afterwards. So here's kind of like what this sketch looks like overall, and I'm taking a very brief head count of all the OCs. And even though I can see myself counting the ones of like Koji, I can see when I'm counting Sato's, you'll probably see that Sato only has 4. and that made me confused a little bit later because I thought I counted that there was 5 for each of them, but that wasn't the case. There is 6 of Maseki, and I will catch myself, I think, after the line work. I think it's like right when I was coloring in their eyes, because I was like, oh, like Sato, her eyes are like a dark teal, so I was coloring them in and I only counted 4. So yeah, I knew I kind of screwed up because I could have saved myself and made the last Maseki one, the one that's blowing a kiss. I could have easily made that one Sato, and everyone would have had 5, 5, 5, and 5 rather than 5, 5, 6, and 4. So yeah, Sato has one less, Maseki has one more. I'll try to remember for January that I owe Sato an illustration. So yeah, I will redeem myself and give her a little bit more love in the new year, because I definitely won't have time before the year ends. Oh, right. We have jumped into Clip Studio Paint. So I mentioned earlier that I find myself really slow when it comes to inking in Procreate, but that's not like the only reason why I don't really ink in Procreate. I feel like I just don't like my lines in there either, or the stabilization. So you'll see in the bottom right hand corner of the video right now, I have the stabilization set to 100, which is very rare for me when I'm doing line work on Clip Studio Paint, because I don't usually require this much control, but for me to go as fast as possible and not having to redo as many lines over and over again, I like having this kind of stabilization to be super slow. I'm kind of like the same way in Paint Tool Sai as well, where I have the stabilization set pretty high. But if I'm doing line work a little bit differently, like I'll show some examples on the screen, I keep it anywhere between I think the 20 to 30 range, and if I want more stabilization, I'll kick it up to just like under 50. But for the sake of time, I did set it to 100 just because it is easier for me to make less mistakes this way. Also, I decided to get rid of the borders for all of these, and I needed to put a line underneath each individual chibi because I wanted to be able to easily color them. But at some point, you'll probably see at the very end, I am going to separate them all so that I can use these as like little emojis at some point, because I think they're very expressive and very cute and very vibrant, so it'd be kind of cute to use them in the future for, I don't know, future stickers, or if I want to use them for YouTube shorts and stuff, maybe I'll do that. But let's talk about the process a little bit. So after I filled in the bottom lines of each of the chibis, I went ahead and used the selection, or like the magic wand tool, to select the outside of every chibi, and then inverted the selection to fill in the gray. But if you want to have a quick and easy way to do the outline, all I did was, I believe it's you hold control while clicking your line work layer or your line art layer, and it'll basically select your lines. After that, you can go and expand by pixels, and I did mine by about 7, I think. And you can kind of create a much thicker version of your line work, but to make sure that it doesn't make the inside very visible with the dark outline that's been like kind of expanded, I went ahead and put that gray layer above it so that only the outside will receive kind of that dark outline, and it makes it a little bit easier for my lines to kind of pop and let the colors kind of stay within the lines and make it look a little bit more softer by having the thin lines on the inside. Now I'm going to also change the color of the lines a little bit later as we go on, but right now I'm just going to go ahead and start to color. So to make coloring also a little bit easier, because I've already popped in that kind of mid-tone gray layer that's basically kind of like the entirety of each of the chibis kind of like contained, I went ahead and made a new folder and clipped that folder to the gray layer. So every new layer that I put into the folder will automatically be clipped to the gray layer. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to not accidentally color outside of my lines, and it's just much easier for me to keep everything nice and contained and clean. So I'm showing you guys that I am kind of using a second window or a second view of my current canvas, and I decided to make it of just the top row because I happen to have all my characters in the top row, so it makes it a little bit easier for me to color pick, and then that way I can keep all of my OCs kind of consistent and kind of unified in that way. So to also make things a little bit easier and I don't have to keep continuing to color pick, I went ahead and selected, let's say, Akemi's eye color, which is kind of that gold and yellow. I would fill in all the gold for every Akemi on the page, and then I'll fill in the lower half of his iris and then the whites, and I'll do that for all the OCs. After that, I went ahead and went back to the first 4, and we're going to color them completely so that I have kind of a pre-arranged color palette so that I can color every subsequent chibi afterwards with ease. So yeah, it just makes a little bit of the workflow a little bit more quicker, and I think that's basically it in terms of the coloring phase, I think. Actually, there is one last thing. So when I start to work with the shadows for the colors, so for the most part, I have the base colors for all my chibis already done. I put a blob of color in each of their hair of a color, and I have that color set to multiply because ideally I would like to shade with multiply on for all the characters at the same time so that it makes it a lot easier. That way I don't really have to tailor particular shadows for each of the individual OCs, even though their color palettes are a little bit different. I found like a softer purple that's on kind of on the mid-tone side kind of fit the best in terms of the shadow popping enough from their hair color, and it didn't look too weird. After that, I went ahead and did kind of the opposite. I went and made a new layer, set it to screen. I picked a pretty kind of like orangey yellow and I made that the highlight. So kind of similar premise where I wanted to make sure that the highlight color is kind of the same across the board in terms of the color that I'm using, but because I'm relying on the blend mode layer, it's changing depending on what color is underneath. So I took that to my advantage for also the clothing, so I used the exact same kind of yellow color or yellowy orange color for the highlights for the clothing, and then for the shadows I still use that same kind of little purple color. I did not record the entire process of me doing the coloring because I took a lot of breaks in between, and also I was just not wanting to really show the footage either at like 8x speed or me cutting a lot of the footage. So right now I'm showing you guys kind of the last finishing touches. You can also see that the mouth color is also kind of more of a reddish brown. I've also changed the hair to have kind of like the same shadow color to help outline some of the inside lines to be a little bit softer, and as it gets closer to the shadow color it reverts back to black. So I just wanted some areas to have a little bit of that soft touch to it without having to kind of needing to color every individual lines to be super clean. So yeah, I think that's it for the last OC video of 2023. And I forgot to mention this earlier, the reason why I'm even doing this video was because last year I've also drawn my OCs for the last video of 2023, so I thought it would be appropriate to do that for today's video as well. So I think that's it for the entire drawing process. But the last step that I'm going to do for myself is that I'm going to separate all these into individual versions because it'll be easier for me to use in the future. But I hope you guys had a wonderful 2023, and I hope 2024 will be amazing, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!